Festival presented by Coles. I am Tiana A.E. Clayton Mallet, Black Lens Community Relations Coordinator. This virtual event is part of the Sense of Belonging series, exploring feelings of isolation, dynamics of racial, ethnic, and other salient group identities related to people who identify as first generation, those with diverse abilities, and transracial adoptees. Today's conversation focuses on first generation college students and their unique experiences navigating higher education institutions. I have the pleasure of speaking with three individuals who identify as first generation college students and have extensive work experience within higher education institutions. Before we dive into the conversation, for those joining us live, please don't forget to engage the chat with your questions and comments. Now, let's get started. I'm excited about this conversation. My panelists, I would love for you to briefly introduce yourself by giving your name, highest educational degree as of today, institutional affiliation, and current job title if you want to share. Let's start. Yeah, whoever wants to start first.
I can go first. Hi, everybody. My name is Daitu Desasa, and I have a master's of arts in educational administration. And my current institution that I am at is a University of Maryland, where I am a project coordinator in the Center for Diversity and Inclusion in Higher Education.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenny Sack. My highest level of education, I have a master's of arts in student affairs and then I'm currently at the University of Maryland as a second year doctoral student in the higher education, student affairs and international education program, policy program, with also serving as a graduate career education advisor with the University Career Center and President's Promise.
Great. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Quentin Cotton. I have a PhD in clinical investigation from the University of Wisconsin Madison. Currently, I'm a postdoctoral associate at the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities.
Excellent. All right. So we're just going to dive in. So, the topic of first generation college students is a big one within higher education. I think all of us know that. The textbook definition of first generation college student is a person whose parents do not have a bachelor's degree. So, with that definition, though, research has identified characteristics associated with being a first gen student. So, some of those characteristics being needing more financial support, challenges with persistence and degree completion are just some of the few kind of characteristics. Based on your research and personal experience, besides this textbook definition, what are some of other kind of implied characteristics, if any, of being a first generation college student or the first gen experience? Let's start off with Daitu.
Oh, I felt that coming. I think that one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking was the impact of a first generation family. I think that while our families support us, and that's a great thing, there's also a level of, especially I think in the graduate level work, there's a level of not not understanding or having the knowledge about kind of like what you're doing, or hearing that, oh, you're still in school. Why are you still there? So I think there's a level of understanding yourself as being in a first generation family, because then there's also the expectation of, which is not a bad expectation, for you to help others around you and help your continue to grow and prosper, while you're also trying to find your own mentors to help you understand, and I guess socialize yourself into school and into graduate school, especially. The socialization process can be very, well, it was for me very difficult. So I think that was the thing that I was thinking about, like being first generation and how your family really impacts, for me, your experiences as a first time student.
Thank you. Any other thoughts about that?
I think for me, first gen, it's interesting because I see it as related to one's exposure to higher education. And so oftentimes, folks who have not traveled the path don't have all the information, knowledge, tools, skills, wisdom to help you move forward and make the decision to go to college. But that's also true for folks who have parents who have gone to college, um, who have not taken the time to invest and nurturing people on that journey. And so when I think about first gen, um, I think about exposure and one's environment, creating the conditions for that individual to be successful.
Thank you, Jenny. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with you both, but I come
Mhm.
from a lens of being a child of immigrant as well, right? I think there's a different experience between first generation American as well as like first generation like children of immigrants, and that can be from many different demographics and background, but the assumption is it comes from too specific, type of background, and neglecting or assuming to and it misses some of the first generation students that we can serve. But it's also from previous experience and like research and just talking to students, some of them don't know that they're first generation either, so that also complicates what it means to be a first generation college student as well as the experience that come with it. But I also think that it builds a level of like wealth, so the cultural wealth and the community wealth that comes out of being a first gen. You're navigating these spaces because you're forced to, but then it you run into things that um, help elevate the journey in a different way. But it's also still some barriers and obstacles because of those assumptions and our need to disaggregate some of this first gen data by different demographics. It's so many things. Also, the reflection of having three different formal definition within this country for first generation students can also blur some of the support and resources that can be impactful or contribute to the student's success. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you for that. You, Jenny, present another possible issue that folks have with this definition of first gen college student is combining all students together and not really thinking about the different nuances of social identities being like income, ethnicity, citizenship status, all of that. What are y'all thoughts about this wanting to put everyone in the same box? And what are some of the challenges with that when it comes to the definition of first generation?
I understand the need to have a label because it makes pulling together an intervention easier, right? One label, one program to meet the needs of people who fall into that label. Unfortunately, we know that doesn't work. We know that people's lives are complicated. For many people, being first generation, it's just not an individual issue. It's a
Right.
family issue because people are representatives of their family. They bring the weight of their community with them. They bring their other identities with them. Um, our programs just aren't accommodated to address those complex needs. And that has implications for who we hire within the higher educational
Mm,
realm to support folks, how they are trained, but also has implications for the types of tailored, unique supports that we provide to individuals. And all programs can't serve all people. And I think that for me, the question is, how do we strike a balance? Are there components of successful programming that just should be applied to everyone
Mm,
to ensure they're successful.
thank you for that. Who else?
Yeah, I think Dr. Cotton, you hit it. There are certain foundations and basic that you can integrate into any program, right? That supports all student success or development. And the idea of combining and disaggregating or making things synonymous with each other can be complex and blurry, but I think it's also a good thing to have both options on the table, right? How from a bigger picture lens does this look, and then getting down into the details, right? Because every individual, as Dr. Cotton was saying, different types of group or different types of social identities need different types of resources and support. Doesn't mean that they aren't equitable, but we just have to adjust the way we see resources and funding and support programs and pathway programs for these different groups based off of the needs and or their developmental needs or like support to be successful student. And I think what we try to do is just lump everything into it without thinking about, okay, what makes sense that goes together, right? Whether it's cultural spaces or affinity spaces or just spaces to have discourse and dialogue, like how are we building these things? And it's very strategic, and like he said, Dr. Cotton said, it takes experience, but also what is your like perspectives and what is your global view, because that contributes to the impact of a program or like development of like students as well. So
Thank you. Daitu, did you have anything that you wanted to offer?
No, no, I'm still letting it formulate in my mind. So we can move to
Excellent.
the next thing.
All right. So the theme of this virtual series, thank y'all for that. And for those folks that are watching, like the definition of first generation college student, like a lot of things within higher ed, it is often put in a box. Everyone is put there. And the need to kind of separate out and be specialized is very important. The theme of this virtual series is a sense of belonging. And so I have a couple of questions related to that. And I'm going to ask you to think back to your undergraduate experience when you were getting that 4 year degree. If I'm correct, I think all of you, including myself, we went to a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution, which can create some very interesting experiences for people who identify as first generation college students. And so through that lens, that identity lens, and we'll integrate other social identities in there too. Um, what does a sense of belonging, what does that even mean as it relates to higher education?
So Tiana and I went to undergrad together. So I'll just say this: my first year during undergrad was really interesting from the sense of being first gen and belonging. I want to talk about the use of media
Mm,
on college campuses. So we had within the university newspaper a section called Viewpoints, and this got me riled up. We had articles talking about rap music being the cause of out of wedlock births among African Americans. We had an article that talked about um, a violent episode and said that Black youth walked away from the scene of the crime. Um, Eating fried chicken and munching on watermelon. And so this was the type of viewpoint that persons that I went to um, the undergrad with held. And so from my perspective, I was around a bunch of people who saw the world differently and by default saw me differently. I'm like, hey, I like fried chicken and watermelon. What's wrong with that, man? And so I think that for me, just seeing the messages that were sent to me, even
mm,
in print, right?
mm, mhm,
It felt very sort of isolating. One other thing, and you all probably can relate to this, being in the classroom, and being divided up into groups and
Mm.
not
Could you
having
find
your
a group? Could
perspective
you find a
heard.
group? Right.
Yeah, yeah, and people sort of like diminishing your perspective in a group as you are going through content, and so for me, there's something about communication um, that I think can either make people feel a part of something, or communication is one of those things that's like, no, you don't belong here.
Mm. Thank you for that. Yes. What does, y'all had some PWI experiences, Jenny and Di too. What does a sense of belonging even mean? What did it mean?
I think for me, I my specific experience is at a SLAC, so a small liberal arts college, and I think that is even you have to really consider how many students of color on campus, and then what I'm thinking about is the tokenization. I feel like now that I understand that I was used for the institution. Um, it came with a lot of privileges of leadership, training and being able to be a leader on campus, and I was able to be involved. But I think about the number of Black students that were there, and how, or even students of color, period, and how tokenized we were, and even being able to find. I think we were talking about staff earlier, but being able to find staff on campus that even looked like you. Um, I can count on one hand the number of Black staff we had, and then the number of Black women staff we had. And thinking that now as a professional, how many of those people are supporting all of the students of color, and how much labor and burnout is added to that. So I think for me, I really think about sense of belonging at like a small liberal arts PWI as a sense of tokenization. And I think that
Mm.
while I loved my school, I also wish that I would have been able to have more experiences where I was around other people of color from other schools or larger schools, to kind of be able to just breathe, and like learn more about my own racial development, my racial identity development, and my own development as a first generation college student as well, because I feel like I was working so much as a student that I
Mm.
didn't get a chance to really develop my identity until I left. So until I went to a larger PWI, I was able to really take the time to really sit and reflect and think about those things.
Thank you. Jenny, what is a sense of belonging? What did it mean to you? What does it mean?
So coming from Philadelphia
Mm.
and going to the middle of central Pennsylvania
Wow.
at a large research one institution, sense of belonging was very interesting, transitioning into that space, where there were riots and where there were a lot of racial issues and social injustice on campus that, for me, sense of belonging then became finding my people. And that doesn't mean like necessarily related to any social identities or whatever else, but that helped, right? But finding my people was basically like, who can help me be myself in this space, in this little bubble that I'm surrounded by nothing that looks or have come close to the experiences that I've had, right? Before coming into this very prestige research one institution that upholds its name very well, but surrounded by rural central PA. So I've never seen so many cows or horses before. So that's the city girl in me.
Mhm.
So being able to tap into these people who are, I call my people or community, and basically encouraging me and supporting me in places that they may not be comfortable with, or challenging myself to be open, have created that sense of belonging, created that leadership, and created that pathway in building spaces that is inclusive. So I was privileged to be able to go to a cultural center and learn about my racial identity, as well as how my perspectives of racial and ethnic understanding impacts those around me, whether it's being in a student organization or a sorority or engaging in the classroom. Like, what space am I taking up and what perspective do I hold? So that sense of belonging came when I was open enough to be able to let people support me. And I think as a first generation, we operate, well, I'm speaking for myself and those who I've had experience with who are first gen, we operate in this independence mindset. Like, I have to do this alone. I have to walk this path alone. But the sense of belonging come with other people. And it's building those relationships and building those networks that open up other pathways and resources that you may not know on campus, whether it's like a simple library loan that saves you $400 from buying a textbook. So the interlibrary loan, or tutoring spaces, and knowing that somebody else is just as bad in calculus as, I don't really need this because it's not. So just having that sense of like community and space of belonging to be authentic and no judgment. So that sense of belonging at a PWI.
Thank you for that. So y'all talked a lot. What I was hearing was issues related to messaging on campus, messaging coming from sometimes students who don't look like you, and they have not had diverse experiences. The tokenization part. So being that one black student, sometimes who people will ask you to speak for. Oh, what do the black people think? Like you can speak for all. And then also just the issues of kind of resources and whatnot on campus. So, in your experience, and maybe Dr. Cotton and Daita, you can elaborate on this more because Jenny got to it actually. Of what were some of the people, programs, either on campus or off campus, that kind of helped you feel like you belonged on campus. And we know that different resources on campus, and it can be a person because representation is important, can make all of the difference in the first gen college experience. So, what were some of those people, programs, or resources that kind of help mitigate some of the challenges of that sense of belonging as a first gen on a college campus?
Yeah, I can jump in and let's start kind of. I think going back to something that Jenny said, actually talking about developing relationships. I think if Jenny would allow me to add, I would add right relationships. So I think you need to
Mm,
be able to develop the right relationships because I feel like, especially first year going in, so many people who are trying to grab your attention, be involved with this, do this, come here. Like you're welcome. And then I think it's who is authentically here for me to succeed. And sometimes you don't know those people. So I think just as one example of being a first gen student, and this is when I was close to graduating, my senior year in school, I had found out that I wasn't going to be able to graduate because of something with financial aid. And so the vice president of the institution, because I just really literally broke down in the hallway, and I know they passed me by and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'll be okay." And so they found, unfortunately, I knew, I think they did the right thing in this case, but they knew a black woman that was close to on campus. They found her and let her know, and she reached out to me. And I use that example because I think even though I didn't have a close relationship with the vice president, he knew who I was in the circle of our leadership circle at the school. And I feel like that's a good example of how he used the network and found someone to help me, even though he knew he might not be the right person. So I think having that right relationship with him and right relationship with the black woman campus, who our house department, really helped me um, have persistence through that moment. So I think for me, that's one example of how the right relationships can and help you out, and also recognizing there to use you as a first
mm,
gen student, whether that's other students, um, organizations or whether that's faculty. So also, who is like authentically there for you in your corner, and you know that they're really here to see you um, complete and do your best work.
Oh, so important because that tokenization thing is serious. Dr. Cotton.
Yeah, I'm just taking it all in. I think that both Jitty and Dai two mentioned something. Dai two, you've walked the fiery plank. It sounds. I think I agree with everything that's been said, and I like the part of find you the right people,
Mm,
but what you are both saying to me is that part of this experience of belonging, finding community, is that it's an action word, that you have to be an active player in the game in your social and academic experience. And for me, what I tried to do was identify a range of people, whether it
mm,
be administrators, faculty, other students. So I had folks at different levels on campus that were helpful. So I started the gospel choir up as an undergrad. And I remember I had a VP of student development who was like kind of iffy, but I kept pushing. And he was like, wow, this guy must really want this. And we ended up building a really positive relationship during my undergraduate tenure. I had faculty members that were extremely helpful to me during that time. I was a McNair scholar, and
shout
so
out.
someone introduced me to research. That person just kept, I took a class with that faculty member. We kept building a relationship. That just opened so many doors. I was a part of the educational opportunity program, which
Shout
McNair is a
out
part of.
EOP. Hmm.
So I did started out with Upward Bound, then did student support services and did McNair. So I had this group of people who were committed to me, who were pushing me toward excellence and being supportive of me, not holding my hand, but really being a really sort of just a foundation for me that I really leveraged throughout my entire career. And so, Jen, I really heard what you said about this piece about relationship. Those relationships do matter. And it's this sort of get yourself in the game, but die too with the right people, right? And
Hmm.
it's those connections that you make that are enduring and that feed your spirit in different ways.
Yes, thank you for that. So, what are some of the lessons, or rather, a different question? Has your definition, your personal definition of what a sense of belonging means, has it changed as you kind of matriculated through your higher education years? So, all of you have your undergraduate, you have your master's, and now you're either got the PhD or on the journey to getting the PhD. Has your definition of what it means to belong within a higher education institution, has that changed at all?
I want to maybe answer this question twice. I'm going to
Okay.
tell you the first thing that's on my head. Um, I've learned that I don't feel like I have to belong.
Mm,
I have learned that within me, I'm enough. And I think that when we talk about first generation, that's code for not confident.
mm.
That's code
Let's
for,
get into
oh,
it.
you're being put in a scary position in life. And I reject those things that we associate with those words that are oftentimes unsaid. And so for me, when I think about what I bring and what I show up as now, yeah, all this life experience, working class inner city guy who's now in academia, yeah, I'm here and I'm going to show out. And not only that, I can do it because I'm good, I'm better, and the perspective that I bring is can't be undervalued.
Mm,
And I think that, particularly for folks who are continuing in academia, this sort of when I show up, I'm bringing other things to the table that other people couldn't possibly bring. And I see the value of that now that I
mm.
probably didn't see at the time.
Okay. Cultural capital, we know about it. Jenny or Daitu?
Yeah, I mean, sense of belonging. I've always said, like, even before I think the first experience where a space of invisibility didn't exist in some way, or took over was in my doctoral journey, because that's where I saw myself in the educational work. So let me work backward, right?
Mhm.
So now it's more about how does this work impact me and my community and my own professional and personal like growth, right? How does that sense of belonging within the classroom and experiences outside of the classroom foster that sense of belonging? Before, it was more so not about disrupting what was already there.
Mm,
So being in, I'm going to say it, majority white spaces have really taught me to code switch in different ways. So, like, feeling like, okay, I do belong in these spaces. So, a big thing is like the difference between East Asian and Southeast Asian. And typically, like, we're the trailblazers. We're the first one coming from survivors of genocide. So, like, thinking about who is in the room is like me, I had to come to terms with, like, no, that's the uniqueness of you. Like, you don't have to exist in somebody else. And it allowed me to take up more space within a classroom, bringing my unique dialogue into it, but also, like, demystifying like what it means to be first gen and being the bright one in the room and not being scared to take up that space as well. I think we've always taught to like be quiet, stay in your lane, like do what you're supposed to do so that you can move around and not be like to so that they don't look at you some type of way. And that's
mm.
what we were like taught to think as ourselves. But sense of belonging really like, okay, I do take up these spaces and I do make an impact in these spaces, and are there people around me affirming that? But also, am I really like taking that care, like who I am? Am I sharing who I really am? Because at the end of the day, it really doesn't feel like you belong if you don't really put yourself in it. So that's how like it is now versus like it was back then.
Thank you for that. Daitu.
Yes, I really feel like my thoughts of sense of belonging have evolved greatly. Um, it really helps to have studied higher education to really help you really unpack, I think, belonging and other things. But I think for me, what I'm thinking about is the layers of belonging, because, like Jenny said, so my dad is a immigrant to this country as well. Um, I kind of got it. I mean, I got the chance to be in multiple spaces, right? So I made myself belong, similar to what Dr. Cotton's saying, right? I found my different spaces to belong in. So whether that's with the Black students on campus, whether it's with national students, whether it's with some of my white colleagues that I have a connection with. I think also being from the Midwest, I mean, I'm used to being around white people, so it's not like, oh, this is my first time being the minority in the room. So there's
Mhm.
like you find your ways to navigate the different groups that you're in, even if it's finding other people who are first generation. So I think the thing that I think about as my sense of belonging evolves is I'm going back to this authenticity piece because I really am passionate about that. Is finding people who are really going to be in your corner to help you through the journey and who are on the same path as you. Because so many people and you'll have so many relationships that you really need to see where you want to be and then find people who are going there or have beyond where you're already at, to continue to keep it. So I don't know. That's what I was thinking about with sense beyond a belonging.
Thank you. So we cannot have this conversation and not really talk about the responsibility of higher education institutions and the environment that is created. Um, so, what are your thoughts about the responsibility of higher education institutions in making sure or doing their part to ensure that students who identify as first gen feel that sense of belonging? So, what do they need to do better? What advice, like what policies or whatnot, do they need to have um, to make the experience not so challenging for first gen students? It's probably a long
I don't
list,
mind. I don't mind
but
starting. Yeah, it
yeah.
is a long list. I was thinking about this. I think the first thing that I think about for first gen students is I think about Anthony Abraham Jack and the privileged poor. So thinking about
Mm,
like students that are at elite schools, but a lot of their you know a lot of the difficulties in their career in their life as a college student is around economic disadvantage. So I'm not saying that all first gen students are economically disadvantaged, but I think that for considering that their parents don't have bachelor's degrees, we can also consider like maybe where they are at economically. And I think that's really important for schools to remember because that is not just about you having enough money to go to school, right? That's also when your friends are going out on the weekends, are you able to go? Like that, are you able to buy your books? Like it's so much more than just money to attend. It also impacts you socially. It impacts you mentally. So I think like universities, higher education institutions should think about the support that they're offering students as far as financial resources or even navigating, finding discounts or, we have this promo code for you for the bookstore. There's so many different ways that we can help students to navigate their economic disadvantage. So that's one thing I was thinking about.
Right, too. I want to sort of add a little bit more to that. And this has implications for what happens after folks graduate.
mm,
So this first gen identity just doesn't stop, right? This first gen identity continues when you're paying student loans back. This first gen identity continues when you're on your first big job with the degree, right? And so the question, Tiana, that you're asking is mechanistically, what can we see happening within university settings
hmm
that not only addresses sort of this experience that folks will have during their time in the program, but for me, how do we develop programming or interventions that prepare folks to succeed in life? And so for me, I certainly think that the economic piece is important, but I also see this as a conversation about how do we care for the whole person.
mm,
This is a conversation about how do you see yourself, your own esteem and efficacy. For me, this is about how you protect your peace. This is about how you think about your overall health. And so for me, um, I really do think these programs need to get back to the basics. What does it take to prepare a young person to succeed in the world? And how do we create a campus climate so that no matter where you come from, you can find community and be supported? I don't want to mention specific like policy things, but I think that there's this general idea that I think universities have to continue to struggle with. How do we take all of these diversity statements, all of these equity statements that we have?
so many.
The question is, how do we translate that so that students really feel down to the core of their experience that they have a place at that university and that they're being set up for success.
Yes. And
So, when I think about institutional practices and needs for first gen students, I think about, like you said, the mechanism, Dr. Cotton. There, there is so much more access and so much more acceptance of first gen students, but resources and exposure to resources or just exposure of that demographic is really invisible in these spaces. Like, I did some research for a course on the amount of outward or forward facing first gen information or resources, or like Daitu said about discounts and stuff like that. Like, students like us are looking for those things to save, but also the cost of education and the massification of education has really put more burden and obstacles that people aren't addressing, right? Like thinking about minimum wage and thinking about on campus job and what type of benefits are you giving to these students who are balancing this like heavy cost of education now, right? Especially at larger institutions, or because spaces of education wasn't prepared for us to come in this mass like um number. But the structures are still the same. So the system needs to be fixed in that way. And I think more so like investing in, I know there are pathway programs and intervention, but really investing in intentional and targeted mentorship. What does that look like, right? And mentorship can come in many capacity that can lead to career attainment or career knowledge or development and exposure. Building these networks within these organizations in small pockets that students can feel vulnerable but also express what they want out of this holistic development, right? So, and training of faculty,
mm,
administrators, staff, even down to like, university health centers. Like, these things are very much so still blurred for some of the students, whether they're first gen and undocumented, first gen and child of immigrants. We can't individualize service to everybody, but we can do some proper and complex training for those we expect to serve students. Some students have attrition and retention issue because of who they face on campus. Like Daitu said, it's finding the right people. But if you never find the right people, what does that lead to? So there are structural and administrative things that really can be focused on. It's how much are you investing in it? How much do you really want first gen students to graduate on your campuses and at your institution?
thank you for that. So, so many more questions, so little time. Um, but Dr. Cotton, something you said that the first gen, that identity stays with you after, well, after college. Um, so how would you how do you think about a sense of belonging as you have navigated the workforce? And so I always call, like, after you graduate from college, get your undergraduate, I call it adulting part two. Because now you got your big person job, and you gotta, navigate, how to figure out benefits, salary, and all of those things, while still possibly having familial responsibilities. Because again, like you said in the beginning, like, you just not, that whole degree that you got is for all of the family members in your community. And so now people are extra excited because not only you got the degree, but society says some money, some zeros will be added to um, your paychecks. So, what is it like navigating that, your first gen identity, into the workforce? What was that like? And a sub question is, what can maybe different employers, companies, corporations do to kind of better support those who identify as first gen, if that's the demographic they're even thinking about?
Yeah, yeah. I'm a very blessed person. but I've been financially broke most of my life. That didn't stop when I got my job, right? And so what people are often sort of seeing is this first gen, I don't even want to call it a first gen tax. It is a tax that many people, especially folks who are family oriented, um, who are community oriented, people are reaching out,
Mhm.
asking you that door of opportunity that you went through, hold it open for me. I think the challenge is some people are like, hold it open for me, and they never walk through the door. They just ask you to throw things back through the door to them, if you get my drift. Um, I think that what employers can do, I think that there's some really practical things. One, help people with the wardrobe.
Ooh,
Buying all of these wonderful clothes to succeed in the the
to be
business world.
professional.
Yeah,
Even though we
professional
get into a
attire,
whole conversation about that, but yeah, that's a thing. Yeah.
that's a thing, right? I think that there are incentives like purchasing a vehicle. I mean, that's a thing. When we talk about first gen, we also have to think, well, maybe we should be thinking about what have folks gone through. And so what do these credit scores look like? I remember when I first graduated, um, from when I came out of my master's program. It was like, dude, I got to get a car now to get to all of these meetings, and I can't buy a hoopty driving my little, I can't drive that around attending my professional meetings. And so I think that there are some incentives that can be provided to folks to support this transition.
Thank you. Yes, y'all have been in the work world. Daitu and Jenny, what you got? What was that like?
I think it's I want to say, we think about the family aspect of helping and giving back. I was thinking about when Dr. Cotton is talking, it's this level of once you achieve your degree or you are going for advanced degrees, the level of coming back home to now shame over
Mm,
your advancement, right? So I think it's a level of also pushing yourself if you have more that you want to do with your career or more that you want to do professionally, to continue to do those things while letting some relationships go, or not letting them go necessarily, but letting, you may even not be as close to some people now that you feel like you've achieved it. Like, they might start having some problems, is what I'm saying, with how you present, or, the changes that you're going through and you're evolving. I think this is a big thing that happened when I left professionally. You're evolving, and then you go home and you're like, oh, ain't nothing changed. Like, everything is still the same, and that's great. um, but you got all these great ideas, and people are just like, yeah, that's cool, but you come to the barbecue on Saturday, So it's just like finding a way, and I'm thinking about double consciousness, right? It's almost like a triple consciousness because you're like, now I got to be in three different worlds. My world when I go to work, and I'm at home with my family, and trying to really find the way to balance everything. But I think also, professionally, I've kind of just learned to be who I am and not make excuses for that professionally. I will say I'm fortunate to work in a place where there are a lot of people of color, right? So I'm not going back to a job that doesn't allow me to kind of like be myself, or use AAVE or anything, whatever I want to do. So
yeah.
that's a different thing that people might not work in environments that's so accepting just being authentic in who they are. But I'm just tired of like having to, do the okey doke for people. So at this point, I think in my career, like if you can't accept me for who I am, then don't hire me. this might not be the place for me to be belonging. Let me find somewhere else. So I think like that's where I am on that. So yeah, those are my comments.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, not everybody gonna see what you see. So
Hmm.
keep that in mind. Whether they were your siblings and raised with you, y'all all have different ways of seeing your path and the decisions that you make. So I think as organizations and industries think about what type of resources that can help elevate like the individual experience at their companies or even at their institution is thinking about um, the services outside of that can contribute to productivity or efficiency. So like, are you doing community building in a different way where there is incentive to earn not just like little knickknacks or whatever, but like large amount of money, or like that can contribute to like personal and financial alleviation or resources that's needed. So like if you need I think there's only certain industries that do that. Even wellness resources, right? If you have a high demanding tech job and thinking about mental wellness and being on camera or being on TikTok and Instagram all day long, the exhaustion and the mental exhaustion, then what can you serve your employees or the people of your company with? It's just about fostering that sense of like support networks and systems. And that's not just support in like, hey, are you doing okay today? It's like, okay, here is some professional development growth and some personal things that you can get involved in, whether they're affinity spaces,
Hmm.
right? Because not every community need the same thing, and not every community thrive off the same thing or be productive. So as leadership or managers, like, you got to think how your team work,
Hmm.
and incorporating and advocating for those things because you have the power or privilege to do so. But yeah, that pathway and that door of being a first gen, I also wanted to put on that, like, don't be afraid to leave.
Mm,
um, we get
that part.
sentimental and attached to our hometown and our community, thinking that we are going to lose something. And like Datu said, you go back and you've outgrown a lot of things and things have stayed the same. But you won't know that until you leave because you don't know what you don't know. But also provide some grace to the community as well, because they haven't walked that path or been able to see that gain that knowledge or awareness. So like, and as a first gen student, I always say that I speak many languages, because when I go home, I can't speak the way I speak to the people I speak at University of Maryland, or sometimes my accent do slip out and they're like, what? So um just remembering like where you come from, but also don't forget like and lose sight of where you're going as a first gen student. A lot of people will have a lot of things to say, and don't be too attached to home because you can always go back to.
China, can I have one
Wonderful.
more thing? I'm so sorry.
Yep.
So
Hmm. Yep.
what Jenny said real quick. I think it's also being okay with people where they are, like you said,
Hmm.
where when you go back, like, okay, maybe they don't want to do all of this that you're doing, and that's okay. I think that's something I had to learn because you see the potential in people, and sometimes that's not what people want. So I think that's something I had to learn as well.
Right. College isn't, the higher education institution isn't for everybody, or it's not. And I've also learned that too. So I always ask high school students, for example, okay, well, what are your options? What did you see? Not expecting that everyone wants to go to college, or take the path that I've taken. Um, so, final question. We also can't, leave this conversation without maybe giving some advice, some wisdom, some sage wisdom to those who identify as first gen, who will continue and they want to go to college. They want to get their bachelor's degree. Um, the paying for education is literally too much money. I also wonder why we're even paying for higher education right now, but that's still a thing. Research around getting a bachelor's degree, a lot of people are like, well, I don't need to go to college. We can get into a whole discussion about that. And other research has identified that if you do have a 4 years bachelor's degree, that can kind of change um, the the trajectory as far as income and how much you make and all of those things associated with that. So for those students, future students who identify as first generation, um, what would be your advice to them as they navigate higher education institutions?
I think what I have to say um, is you are worthy.
Mm.
You deserve to give yourself the best opportunity you can to succeed in life. Hold your head up high. Don't you dare look back. Keep going. Keep pushing. No matter what it looks like, there will be a ram in the bush. There will be some support. There will be some conversation. There will be some person, even if it's someone who you would never think it would be. Um, I tend to lean into optimism. If that is a goal that you have for yourself, keep pushing and it will happen. Amen.
Amen. Ashe. Yes. Ah, we not about to have church right now. Yes, sage wisdom. What is it for those who are going into, who will venture into college to get their, at least their first bachelor's degree? What is your advice, Daitu, Jenny?
I would say, oh, you want to go there too? Okay. I would say, remember, you are one of one.
Hmm.
Nobody knows your journey and nobody knows your needs. So you are the one to advocate of who you are and what you want. So, and taking like that time for yourself. So one of one. And I inspire myself all the time, even if there are challenges that arise, or there are things that you are facing that you have no answer to. Take a moment to breathe and remember from the wonderful Dr. Maya from the wonderful Maya Angelou, sorry, but still like air, you'll rise regardless.
Mhm. Yes. Bring us home, Daitu.
I'm gonna bring it home, but I'm gonna bring it home some with some practical stuff. I'm not an inspirational speaker at all, so I feel like y'all two should have went last. But I'm gonna say use all the resources that are at that
Yes.
school. The institution itself. I'm not talking about the people there. This is a transaction. You are
Mm.
there to get a degree, so show up to every writing center appointments, the gym facilities, go to the movie nights. Do you are either you are paying or some giving the money to the institution on your behalf. So use every single thing. Use those office hours from the professor. Don't feel bad about it. Even if you are good, you feel like I do well in this subject. Still, they can enhance those resources can enhance your work and make it better. And I think that's one thing I would wish I would have done as an undergraduate is to think of my work not as I do well, but how can I enhance myself. So really consider how you can enhance yourself and use every single resource at that school. Use the bus. I'm telling you, make sure you use it because you're paying student fees. Um, so that's my practical and the career. Thank you, Jenny, and the career center as well. Use all of that and get you a good job when you graduate.
Thank you. Thank you. This is all advice that is very crucial in my career as a higher education professional thus far. I've seen a lot of students kind of come and go. All of these are big issues that students are still dealing with. And so the responsibility of campuses to create or do their part to create that sense of belonging is also really important. So we definitely can't let them off the hook. And students themselves, like Dr. Cotton said earlier, it is an active thing. Like, and also what Jenny is saying, like you have to advocate for yourself while you are on that campus and utilize I don't care if you're on a full ride scholarship. Your time is precious. Your time is precious, and you need to utilize all of the resources. on that campus. So again, thank you. I can't thank y'all enough because y'all are busy. Uh, Postdoc, Dr. Cotton, and current graduate students and working, Dr. and Jenny. Yeah, the struggle is real. The struggle is real, especially as you get a little further in the education. They don't make it no more easier. So I thank you for your time. Um, Hopefully a conversation like this can exist again in this type of space. So we're talking about like a film festival space, and we're talking about the first gen college experience. So I hope this conversation can also continue. So thank you again for those who have joined us online. Thank you again for your time. We hope that something was said that inspired you. This will live on Milwaukee Film's YouTube page, so come back and reference it at any time. And make sure you continue to check out the Cultures and Communities Festival presented by Coles. If you are in Milwaukee, please go to mkefilm.org/CCF for more information on the events happening this weekend. So take care. Thank you again, and we hope to see y'all again.